greatness of love among this triad of characteristics identifying the people of God. Remember, Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13, "And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." In our last talk, we considered how love moves us to action, and specifically to the action of forgiving those who have hurt us. Today, I want to take another step in this journey and look at how love motivates us to care for others, or better, to pray for those who may not see life the same way. Jesus said this in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, "You've heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes His sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous." Now, I probably know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking something like this: I can accept that love will move me toward forgiving those who have hurt me, but praying for enemies? That's just love gone too far. Now, if this is what you're feeling right now, trust me, you're in plenty of company. But before we go any farther, let's unpack this a little bit to make sure that we're all on the same page. First of all, when Jesus uses this term enemy here, He means people who don't love us back. In fact, He asks this question immediately following the text that we just looked at. He says, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? Now, this reference to tax collectors is to a people who have different values in life, who take advantage of us in some way, who maybe betray us for personal gain or advantage, or even have sharply different political and social views and values to the point that it causes significant distrust. Now, obviously, this isn't much of an issue today, right? Especially with the fragmentation of society. That's sarcastic, I realize that. Secondly, loving enemies is equated with praying for them in the same manner that God impartially cares for all people, providing what's necessary, like sunlight and rain, to live and to be productive. What this means is that if we're going to love our enemies, we'll be willing to pray for those who don't love us in the same manner that we would pray for those who do. That could be challenging, right? Thirdly, it doesn't mean that we have to see life the same way as those who don't love us. It doesn't mean that we have to withhold the gospel or even our values and views of lifestyle, especially when it contrasts with those held by others that are potentially self-destructive or even socially toxic. Now, Jesus had some strong words for people who claim to know God, that He eventually even sacrificed His life for. So in fact, loving our enemies might mean facing our fears to the point of some confrontation, sharing truths that may be in sharp disagreement with those values of others, even if it puts us in jeopardy for sharing. So, in light of that, let me ask you this. Who are your enemies? And how are you doing in loving them? How are you at separating people from their ideas and values? Really looking at people as created in the image of God and their values and ideas as something that are only temporary, even if they're diametrically opposed to yours. Can you love people and pray for them without them having to support the same political party you do, or the same candidate you do, or the same issues that you hold? Are you willing to engage in difficult conversations over emotionally charged issues in such a way as to point people to the God who loves them, rather than to prove that you're right with regard to the things that you're wrestling with? Now, if that gets down to some uncomfortable places in life, then I'd say we're on the right track. Love is often uncomfortable. So consider these things for the next day or two. And realize this: we were all once enemies of God, and He loved us just the same. So loving our enemies is not something we do because it's comfortable or convenient, but because it actually characterizes people who claim to be children of the Father in heaven. So, love well, my friends.